Tell me, what do you remember about being born?
My father has a joke about that. How far back, excuse me, how far back can you remember? He says he can remember the dog barking at the doctor as he came through the gate to deliver him. Now that's pretty far.
That is pretty far.
No, I can go back to 1936. That's as far back as I can remember.
Tell me some of your earliest memories.
See, now this is 1933 when I was born.
Right.
1936, what I remember then is I had an aunt who was dying of tuberculosis. And I can remember in her bedroom and talking with her when I was just 3 years old.
Which aunt is that?
This is Aunt Lucille, my father's youngest sister,
Okay.
Lucille Walters.
Uh-huh.
She was in nurses training and caught tuberculosis while she was in nurses training. So that's as far back as I can remember, but I do remember things on my grandfather's farm, Grandfather Walter's farm, when he would milk the cows. A cat would be around. He would take the milk and squirt right into the cat's mouth. That was one of the things. Also, too, they had a horse trough there, and the horse trough was very slick. And I can remember in there taking my bath. They didn't have running water in the house. They didn't even have electricity. And they're taking my bath in the horse trough, and I would slip and fall under. My brother would holler for Grandpa. Grandpa would come over and pull me out. So, and I can remember also sliding off of a creek bed and going down in the water, and Grandpa Walters picking me up and taking me back up. So the early farm, Grandpa's tractor had a big tow bar on it, and he built me a little box, and he would go out in the field plowing or whatever, and I'd get tired. He'd just say, go sleep in the box. So I'd go sleep in the box. And they had workhorses. He had a tractor, but he also had workhorses. King and Bess, I think it was, and the G and the Ha thing, And my Uncle Harold, who was just 9 years older than I was, he would sit me up on one of these big workhorses, and my legs would be straight out, and we would ride out and bring in the cows. And bounce on the backbone of that horse. That was wild. As far as around the house is concerned, the first home I can remember living in was number 4. The house I was born, no. 6 weeks later, no. Ellick, no. But when we moved to Dayton, we moved to Dearborn, and I think it was 1935. But I can remember my oldest sister was born in 1936, and I can remember that happening. And I can remember it being a very cold winter. And my Uncle Ralph, my mother's brother, worked in Moraine City nearby, and instead of having to drive all the way back to the farm, he would stay there and not freeze when he went back to the farm in south of West LA. So those are some of those things I can remember. Then I can remember all the rest of the homes very easily. House number 5 would be Groveland. Now, in Dearborn, I was still preschool because I was only 3 or 4 years old. But we moved to Groveland. Now, Groveland was just behind the house on Dearborn. Practically every year, we seemed to move. And that's when I started school. My mother put me in kindergarten when I was 4 years old. So I started very, very young. And I can remember an earthquake hitting it and one of the pictures on the wall being bent. I can remember my brother, my older brother, Bob, he liked to sell things. He sold Christmas seals, and he wanted a wind-up train. And they were doing it in the family room, and I was sitting in the kitchen, and I hadn't eaten my peas yet. And I was told that I couldn't come in and watch the train until I ate my peas. So when everybody was in watching the train, I took my dish and dumped it back into the pan where the peas came from. Then I went in and watched the train. I also remember having German measles at that place, and it had to be dark. It had to be very, very dark, and I can remember every once in a while peeking out the window, trying to see what was going on, if anything at all. Wintertime comes, we would do sledding. Had a next door neighbor, a guy called Burl White. He had a wagon, and we would ride the wagon. We were on a slight hill. We would ride the wagon down the hill. Across the street, a couple of boys went to school with. I remember playing with them. And I can remember one time when we moved to the other side of town, practically over on Pioneer Street, that Dad and Mom had to do something back in our old neighborhood, so they brought me over to stay with the boys. I think their last name was Whistler. And anyway, they forgot to pick me up. So that's another one of the memories of the early childhood. I went to Jackson School when we lived on Groveland, house number 5. And then I was in kindergarten and first 6 weeks of first grade. And then we moved. And the girls lined up and kissed me goodbye. First grader, yeah. We moved across town over on Pioneer Street, and I went to Van Cleve School. So I finished first grade in Van Cleve School, living on Pioneer, house number 6. Then we moved to Main Street, house number 7, and I finished second grade at Van Cleve School. Then we moved back to Upper, house number 8, which we were in for 7 years before we moved to Arizona. So that's some of my early childhood memories. I had real good friends when we lived on Upper Avenue, Bill Wilson and Kenny Eller, and we did a lot of things together. And also, my dad was pretty well into sports. He was a good high school athlete, and we had a baseball team in the area called the Dayton Ducks. I think it was Class D. It was picked up by the Cleveland Indians later, and then we became the Dayton Indians. But we used to go down to the ballpark. It wasn't that far away. And outside of the ballpark, there was an A&W root beer stand. And they sold foot-long hot dogs and root beer, And I always tried to get Dad to buy me some foot-long hot dogs and the root beer. Every once in a while, he did. Every once in a while, he didn't. So when I was in Jackson School, most of my career from 3rd grade through 8th grade, of course, this was during World War II, and we had no male teachers. The principal was female and all of that. And I was in the 8th grade before we had a male teacher, and he was a math teacher. And up to that point, we had no organized sports. The women just didn't bother. And so a bunch of us got together. We played tackle football out on the playground until they told us we couldn't do that. So we went across the street where there was a vacant lot across the street from the school, and we played tackle football there. So they could see us, but they couldn't do anything about it. So we had a basketball tournament when I was in the 8th grade, first organized tournament I was ever in, because we now had a male teacher. And I was on each 8th grade had 2 teams, and the 7th grade each had 1, so we had 6 teams in the thing. But I was on our second team. And after my second team was eliminated, I was playing, substitute on the first team, and we didn't win the tournament. It was won by the other 8th grade. So not very big in sports, that's for sure. High school, Roosevelt High School was not too far away. I could ride the streetcar to go to Roosevelt High School. And it was a one big building. It was 4 stories high. It had 2 basketball courts. It had a swimming pool. It had an indoor track in the rafters above the basketball courts and such. And the cafeteria was on the 4th floor. I mean, we would go there when I was in 7th and 8th grade from Jackson School. We would go there for wood shop and mechanical drawing. So that's when I first started mechanical drawing in 7th grade. And that, of course, led to other things later on, like cartography.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but that's interesting. That's how it started.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of my earliest memories in Ohio.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned World War II. Well, you were in, was it high school or junior high?
Elementary school into junior high.
All right. How do you remember, if at all, World War II affecting your family?
Oh, well, that's easy. I had my Uncle Ralph, who had the farm out near West Ellick, my mother's brother. You know, in 1940, we were getting ready for the war. This is before the Japanese. And they had a draft. You know, goodbye, dear, I'll be back in a year because I'm in the Army now. They drew my number right out of a hat, and nothing guy can do about that. Well, my Uncle Ralph's number was pulled out of the hat. So he went into the Army in 1940. And he was colorblind, so he didn't have to go into the infantry. And he ended up as a supply sergeant, and most of his time was spent on Guadalcanal as a supply sergeant down in the South Pacific. And he had various trainings. He went to Pennsylvania. He was training in Indiana. He went to training down in Mississippi, you know, all over before they sent him when the war started and then things got in there. Then my father's brother, Harold, he didn't graduate from high school until 1942. So that was during World War II. And this is when my grandmother was just living down the street. So he came in and lived with her. And he worked at Inland for a year before he went into the service. So he was 19 when he went into the service. He was in the 36th Infantry Division, which was basically Texas. And he was over there in, I think he started out in North Africa, went to Sicily and into Italy. And then he was in the invasion of southern France. And they were working up their way in southern France. This is in late September 1944 when he was shot and killed. So my memories of World War II are quite vivid in that respect. And I was able to visit his grave where it is in Epinal, France, in sort of southwestern France, several years ago. So that was quite an interesting visit. That's American soil that the French have given to the United States, and the French take care of it, no cost at all. But there were over 500 buried where my uncle is buried, all American soldiers. Now, after the war, they had the opportunity of bringing the bodies back to the United States or having them buried in France or wherever they were. And my grandmother decided just to leave him in France. So he was buried there. But she did put a headstone in the cemetery a half a mile from where I was born. His headstone is there. And it says Harold Walters, 1924-1944, killed in France.
20 years old.
20 years old. Yeah, he was 20 in July, so he lasted, 3 months after that, yeah. So very, very... Of course, in Dayton, we had Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And, of course, that was practically the Air Force Pentagon. And they would bring captured or friendly airplanes into Wright-Pat, and they would fly around. So we saw Zeros and everything. And one time, a mosquito bomber, British mosquito bomber, was flying by, and we were playing guns, bang, 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 shooting it down, and the thing caught fire. We saw the two pilots bail out and float down, and the plane crashed over west of Dayton near Liberty, Ohio. So we shot down an airplane.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to be something.
Also, one thing we had, they had flares, and I don't know where we got them, but they were little parachutes, and we would throw them up and come down, and we would try to put holes through each other's parachutes, throw them up, rode bicycles, flew kites, had a paper route. Had a paper route that, I started when I was in first grade. That's another memory I had when we lived on Pioneer Street. And then I delivered the Dayton Daily Journal of the Dayton Daily News. And had morning routes and had evening routes, and wind, rain, snow, whatever. Rode a bicycle most of the time, but some of the time I pulled a wagon. A little safer to pull a wagon. And then when I was 8 years old, the Inland Chorus had a children's chorus, Inland Children's Chorus. There was 120 members of the chorus, 60 girls and 60 boys from ages 8 to 16. Well, my brother, 2 years older than I was, he sang in it. So when I was 8 years old, I was in on it. So I sang in Inland Children's Chorus, giving concerts. We sang with the Dayton Philharmonic Orchestra, so I've been into classical music ever since. We also give programs in the Art Institute in Dayton, and we also did a Christmas program, and we made recordings too. So we, quite a thing. But my brother was a soloist. Bob was a soloist. He lives out in Fountain Hills, and he's still singing as a program he does on Frank Sinatra. But I was 14 when we moved to Arizona, so that was the end of my career there. But then I started singing in church choirs. I sang in the church choir at Grace Lutheran Church. And when I was in the Army, I sang in the church choir at Luther Place Church in downtown Washington, D.C. Then we came back and moved to Mount of Olives. I sang in the church choir at Mount of Olives. Now I'm singing the church choir at Ascension. So I've been in a few church choirs around. And when I was in the Army, basic training, Fort Ord, I sang in our 6th Infantry Division choir for a program we did over at the Officers Club. It goes back at least to my great-great-grandfather. Great-great-grandfather William Wagaman. He married into the Eby family, and we'll get into that genealogy later. But he married an Eby, and he and his wife were Reformed Lutherans. And there was a church in Ellerton, Ohio, where he is buried. He and his wife are buried in there. And this is southwest of Dayton on Route 4. But and they were the Lutherans. And then, of course, my grandfather Wagaman, my mother's father, was Lutheran, and my mother was Lutheran. Now, she married my dad, who was United Evangelical Brethren, Evangelical United Brethren, EUB, and but he was busy working in World War II. He worked 7 days a week. He worked at night, so she was in charge of more or less getting us to church, and she did. She got us to Westwood Lutheran Church. Sometimes we had to walk, but we got there. So I've been a Lutheran ever since I can remember. I got my confirmation was in Westwood Lutheran Church, but we were a little late in being baptized. I wasn't baptized until I was 13. My brother was early, older brother, but then we had I think 4 of us. Me, my sister Jane, my brother Bill, and my sister Judy. I think we were all baptized at the same time. Joni may have even been in there too, but she was born in 1944. Mm-hmm. This baptism took place in 1946. So I've been Lutheran ever since. I married a Methodist, and she joined the Lutheran Church. After I finished college here in Phoenix, I had the opportunity to go to a Lutheran college in Ohio, Wittenberg University. And that was by the help of a pastor, an interim pastor. He was in seminary, but he was out here for a year. But while he was out here, Pastor Lindsay, the head of Grace Lutheran Church at the time, had a heart attack. So Bill Billow more or less took over the church when he was, 21, 22 years old. Well, more than that, because he was in seminary, probably 24, 25. But he saw that I was headed for a senior college, and he wanted to help me out. So he wrote that college and got me a scholarship, got me a job. And then when he was finished here, he drove me back to Wittenberg to get back there. So that was an interesting story. He was also involved in my Army days because I was drafted while I was at Phoenix College. And he wanted me to finish college, so he even had a right to the state appeals board, the draft board appeals board, to get me so I could finish college. and he won the appeal. I was voted 3-0, and boom, I was reclassified to 1SC, not 1A anymore. But they said, when you finish college, give us a call. You're drafted. So when I finished college, I called him, and I was in the Army in August of 1955. I graduated in June of 55. I really can't talk to people who really served. I was classified physically C because I had a bad shoulder. I lost my left deltoid playing high school football. And so I was a C profile, which means I could not leave the United States. I couldn't even go to the territory of Hawaii or the territory of Alaska at that time, and they were territory. So I was drafted. I had to report downtown Phoenix. We were supposed to take a train into Los Angeles and take a train up to Fort Ord. But something was wrong with the tracks down at Yuma, so we had to take a bus. So we took a bus to Los Angeles, then we got on the daylight train that goes from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and we go up. It was a nice trip. We get up to Salinas, California, where we get off the train, and Army trucks are waiting there to take us over to the fort, and then they went through all of the physicals and this, that, and the other thing. And of course, we had to wait until we got enough people to form the company, and so we had to do odd jobs around the fort. One of the things, we were dismantling an old tent city that the fort had that they weren't using anymore, so we were over taking down tents and sideboards and everything else. And so finally then our company was formed, Company L, the 20th U.S. Infantry Division, and we started basic training about the 5th of September. And of course, there you learn to be a professional soldier. You learn how to kill. And you learn to shoot the rifle, the M1, the carbine, the light 30 caliber machine gun, the heavy 30 caliber machine, the bazooka, the 45 pistol. Then you had to go through training with the gas mask, going into a building, and they put out the tear gas, and you're supposed to wait till they tell you to put your mask on. Guys are running out of the building. I waited. Oh, they also had hand grenades too. We throw hand grenades. We had a close combat course where we had the infiltration course, where we had to crawl underneath live machine gun fire. And the close combat course, we walked to a mock village shooting live ammunition. And we had to keep everybody in line. And I had one guy who just stood, I told him, come, move up, you're going to kill somebody. So, yeah. Then, of course, after your basic 8, you qualify to go to a school. Some people do, some people don't. Most of them went to basic infantry. But my test scores enabled me to qualify to go to the topographic school, which was in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And so I was given leave and went home and then flew back to Washington, D.C., took a taxi down to Fort Belvoir, and I was there for a while. And the topographic school wasn't going to start for 4 weeks. So I was interviewed by a WAC captain, and because of my test scores, and Army Map Service is nearby, I was qualified to go to Army Map Service. So I rode a bus every day back and forth to Army Map Service, about 20 miles away, to work with civilians at Army Map Service in what they call ESID, Engineering Strategic Intelligence Division of Army Map Service. But the thing was, when I was in college, I applied to go to Army Map School and Army Map Service, and it was too late because by the time I had received something from, I think, the Navy cartographic thing, I was already drafted. So, but 3 months to the day, when I was in the Army, I was at Army Map Service.
What did you do there?
Well, when I was in the Army, I was. Oh, that's another interesting story. after I finished Army Map Service, my second 8, I was put on orders to go to Fort Riley, Kansas. The MOS was a cartography. But there was the 535th Engineering Detachment was right in Army Map Service. They were getting ready to go to California to do a field study of Camp Roberts, Hunter Liggett, and part of the Hearst Estates, which is over there in Central California. But the cartographer, I forget his name, couldn't go because he was on doctor's orders. So, boom, I was switched from Fort Riley to Fort Myer, and then we went to California. And we did a field study on the cross-country ability of a M1 tank movement. But I was a cartographer. I wasn't out in the field. I was up at the Presidio, San Francisco, drawing map information as the information came in. And so when we finished there, we went back to Fort Myer, and basically we just worked on different projects as far as mapping was concerned. And then I got involved in sports. At one time I played on 3 softball teams, 2 basketball teams, played volleyball on the bowling league, and as I say, my military duty at Fort Myer was not military. An interesting thing, too, when I was at Fort Myer, some of my barracks mates, we had about 30 people in each barracks. We had little cubicles for 4, 2 bunk beds. And 2 of the guys were from Utah, and they were good Mormons. And they knew I played for the company team, so they asked me if I would play for their ward team in Washington, D.C. So I played for the Washington, D.C. Mormon Church Ward in a league. And we were undefeated in league play, but we lost the first game in the tournament, unfortunately. But at that particular time, Dwight Eisenhower was president, and his Secretary of Agriculture was Ezra Taft Benson, who was a Mormon. And I got to meet the Secretary of Agriculture, dance with his daughter, and Buddy play basketball with a son or 2. So, tough military duty. I hate to say when we're our group and we have people who've been fighting here, there, and everywhere, I even hate to mention what I did in the Army.
Although the cartographic work is important.
Oh, yeah. I was there every day.
Fighting with your pencils.
Yeah. Leaving on my my drawing board with a light above it. Yeah, I was busy.
Right there.
I kept busy when I wasn't playing softball or playing basketball. I mean, I would leave 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we had inspection one time at Fort Myer, and the lieutenant come through, and I drew a chart of my military days, and I have a chart here. I can see it later. But I drew a chart, and that chart was in my closet in the barracks. And the lieutenant saw, and he said, "Well, what's this?" And I said, "That's my sweat sheet." "What do you mean?" "Well, that tells me how many days I've been in the service and how many days I have left." He says, "There's 3 types of people who give me problems: the cooks, the truck drivers, and the jocks." And usually you have to take KP. And I only had to pull KP 4 times while I was in the Army. Because I was... And they made us do that because when the IG would come through, the Inspector General, he would say, "When's the last time you had P?" They had KP. They'd make sure that I had KP. Mm-hmm. And one of the times I had KP at the White House motor pool, which was located in the Pentagon. So I spent a day doing dishes, pots and pans, in the White House motor pool at the Pentagon, which was right next to where I was stationed at Fort Myer. Mm-hmm. Wow. Interesting.
Quite a career.
Interesting.
Quite a military career.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And also, too, when I went on active duty at that particular time in August of 1955, you had to go an 8-year duty. You had to be 2 years, and then you had to be on active reserve duty for the remaining 6 years. But I had joined the Marine Corps Reserve before that time, so I was exempt. And so when I finished my 2 years of active duty, I went on inactive reserve duty for the rest of my career. In fact, they didn't even have an MOS of mine in the state of Arizona, so there was no cartographers in Arizona. And my last week in the Army, when I was being, mustered out, I was playing softball for the company team. Headquarters Company, United States Army, by the way. Headquarters Company, United States Army. The last game, the last day I was in the Army, in fact, I was out of the Army then, but I stayed and played a softball game because we were playing in the top Air Force team. And we had played them before, earlier in the season, and we'd beat them. And so my last duty in the Army was pitching for Headquarters Company, United States Army, against this 1121st Air Force unit. And we beat them again. And so, hey, all of my equipment was checked in. I went to the barracks to stay overnight, and I just stayed on an empty cot with a blanket wrapped around me. And I was headed out the next morning. And as I go to my car, old Sergeant Huggins comes over, and he says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm not in the Army anymore." We had an alert at 2 o'clock in the morning after, the next day. And I didn't even have to go. I was sitting up in my bed and laughing at everybody, going out and standing out in the street and getting an alert. So they were still on alert when I was leaving the next morning. And Sergeant Hudgens said, "You can't go out, we're on alert." I said, "The Army is, but the Air Force isn't." So I went out the Air Force gate. But when I did, I headed for Wooster, Ohio. One of my college roommates was Dick Blake, who was in Wooster, Ohio, lived in Wooster, Ohio. He was getting married, and they saved the wedding date until I was out of the Army. So I drove to Wooster, Ohio, on the Pennsylvania Turnpike into Ohio and such, up in northeastern Ohio. Went down and stayed with Dick. While we were waiting, we went into Cleveland to baseball games, saw the Cleveland Indians play and such. And he got married in a little place called, I think, Greenfield, Ohio, little country church. Married a gal he met at Wittenberg. See, he was my college roommate at Wittenberg. Married a gal there. So that was my first duty, getting out of the Army. Then I had applied to work as a civilian at Army Map Service. And so I went to Dayton and stayed with my grandmother till I got word about what was happening there, and I was hired. And so I got out in August, but in the latter part of September, I was back in Washington, D.C., working at Army Map Service as a civilian.
And this is what year?
1957.
57.
I got out of the Army in August of 57, so this is late September and October. And while I was in the service, I was attending Luther Place Church, singing in the choir and everything. So a buddy of mine, who had just got out of the Army himself, he and I got together and we got an apartment in Arlington, Virginia. And so I was living in Arlington, Virginia, driving to Army Map Service back. He was working in Alexandria, Virginia, so we were right in the middle, going both ways. So I became a civilian, and it wasn't the kind of map service job I wanted. I wanted to be right into the maps. But I was in a section, unfortunately, that was writing. And that, if I would list all of my qualifications, the last on the bottom of the list would be writing. So it didn't work out too well. So I was there only for about 8 months. And I decided, things have got to be better. So I drove to my brother's house in Dayton. My mom, I was on phenobarbital, so I was having little problem there. My mom flew in to Dayton, and Mom and I drove back to Arizona Phoenix. I went to school. I decided, well, I think I'll be a teacher. And so I got home. It was in May when I got home. And I took summer school classes at Central High School, but they were Phoenix College classes at Central High School. And then I enrolled at Arizona State College at Tempe. At that time, it was Arizona State College. But this was in September of 1958. In November 1958, the people of Arizona against Phoenix, against Tucson, voted Arizona State College to become Arizona State University. So I was on campus when Arizona State became a university. And so I took classes. The interesting thing about that, when I started as a graduate student, a young lady from Holbrook, Arizona, named Margaret Burton, also was starting classes at Arizona State College at the university. And we were at Arizona State at the same time. In fact, the first ever football game played at the Sun Devil Stadium was in October of 1958. And Margie was at the game, and I was at the game. But Margie was dating her high school friend from Holbrook. I was dating a gal I had met in college. And so we were both at the game. First game ever, Sun Devil Stadium. Didn't meet each other. So I took courses to qualify for a certificate, a teaching certificate. First semester, then the second semester, I did some practice teaching, they call it. You know, where you underneath a gal. Mabel Johnson was my tutor in that, and it was at the local school where my brothers and sisters were going. And I was in my math class that I taught, my sister, Joni, was in the class. So I did my student teaching when she was there. Well, she didn't want to call me Mr. Walter. She didn't want to call me Elden, so she just called me brother. So I did my student teaching there, but also at the same time, I was taking a course at Arizona State in social studies, improving teaching of social studies. And the professor was a woman named Helen French. Helen French was also on the board of directors at Arizona Boys Ranch, which was located down by Williams Field. And she said, "Hey, you are going to teach at Boys Ranch." Well, I had a choice because I also had offers from Washington School District and Paradise Valley School District. But I decided, hey, this sounds like a neat opportunity, so I went down to Boys Ranch. One of the first things I did at Boys Ranch was teach summer school. And then in August, all of the boys who could went home, but the ones who couldn't go home went to summer camp. And so the first ever summer camp I went to, I was the director. So this was my first teaching job, teaching summer school and being the camp director. And where we went, we were up at Pilgrim's Progress, up near Mormon Lake in northern Arizona. It was run by a Presbyterian church. It was a nice little area there. And while we were there, the boys were here, there, and everywhere. I tried to keep them busy, take them out camping. We went to football game in Flagstaff, and we went to the Grand Canyon, and we did everything we could. So then school started. Back at the ranch, I'm teaching the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. At this particular time, there was only about 36 or 7 boys on the ranch. So I only had 9 students my first day of teaching. Now, this is public school teaching at Boys Ranch because we were directly involved with Queen Creek School. Queen Creek School. So, but they were opening another cottage at the Boys Ranch, and so more boys were coming in, and by the time the year was over, I had about 12, 15 boys. So pretty interesting. But also, too, I was supposed to do something else for the Queen Creek School District. So I said, I'll coach. So I coached the girls' sports. The girls' sport. Now, this is back when? This is back in 1959, when the girls played basketball, when they didn't cross the center line. You had 3 on offense, you had 3 on defense. You never crossed the center line. And I can remember the first game we played against Higley School. My girls got whipped badly. Because what will you do? But those girls were good. They were coachable, and I had a girl named Janet Pierce who could play just as well as any boy could. And by the end of the season, we played Higley School for the championship, and we won. And the second, well, I also coached volleyball and also softball and track and field. But the next year, my girls' volleyball team won the championship, and my girls' softball team won the championship. So we won 3 championships in 2 years. But my third year at Boys Ranch, I was made director of the educational system, and so I couldn't coach anymore. My responsibility, besides teaching the classroom, was to go to Queen Creek School, Higley School, and Chandler High School to make sure that the boys in the Boys Ranch were doing what they should be doing. And if they had any problems, I was there to help them out. And during that year, the superintendent's son, Wendell Newell, was the superintendent. That school year, the student body president was, what was his first name? Anyway, Chip Newell. Chip Newell was voted student body president at Chandler High School, and 3 other Boys Ranch boys were officers.
Wow.
So it made quite an impression there.
What was the Boys Ranch? What was that about?
Oh, it was a situation where they had no parental guidance or anything, and they would get into trouble. So there was an intermedium between home and the corrections facility, which was up at Fort Grant, up near Safford, Arizona. So this Boys Ranch was developed to take the boys who were willing to do that so they wouldn't have to go to Fort Grant. And I know we got them going both ways. I mean, some of them come to Boys Ranch and they filed up and boom, they go to Fort Grant. But then they would come back to Boys Ranch and they were changed. They were pretty good boys after that. They did a good job. Okay, Randy Kelly was quite a character. He's one of the boys that came to Boys Ranch and didn't like it, so he went to Fort Grant. But when he came back, he did all right. And he was voted one of the boys officers at Chandler High School. But I was there, I was single and everything. He said, "Hey, you've got to have a date." So he set me up with one of the teachers at the Chandler High School. And her name was Joan Berrigan. She was from Kansas City, Kansas, and she went to the University of Colorado. And so one of the first dates, University of Colorado was playing University of Arizona down in Tucson. So we went down and saw a football game down there. And she was interesting. Nothing serious, but I used to stop by. I'd go home on the weekends, and I would stop by her place on going back to Boys Ranch on Sunday evening and talk with her. And she left, went back to Kansas City, so she wasn't there very long. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they were trying to set me up with it.
But it was not to be.
And again, this Randy Kelly was driving a tractor, and he was pulling a trailer, and he was coming around the bend, and his tractor ran right into the side of my car. Oh, the Boys Ranch had insurance, so it was fixed. So no problem. But Randy was something else.
Mm-hmm. Continue with your teaching career. What came next?
Oh, what came next? Well, I had a little health problem, and so I decided not to stay at Boys Ranch. And so I was looking for a job elsewhere. And it just happened that the principal at Queen Creek was Homer Elledge. His wife, Dorothy Elledge, taught at a school in Scottsdale. Not the long drive from Boys Ranch to Scottsdale, but she taught there. And because I was teaching combination 4th, 5th, and 6th grade at the ranch, they were a teacher at Tonto School where Dorothy taught was retiring, so they had a 5th grade opening. And so I went to Tonto School and I interviewed and I was hired. So when I left Boys Ranch, I had the summer to go to summer school. I was working on my master's degree, and I was hired at Tonto School. And so when Tonto School opens in the fall, I start teaching 5th grade. But across a little ways over in Scottsdale, it was a Hohokam school. And there was another person who just finished college who started teaching 5th grade. Name is Margie Burton. We could have been on the first bus ride orientation trip too, but didn't even notice her. Could have been at the meetings, didn't notice her. In fact, we had 5th grade meetings once a month, and she would say, well, I was always the girl that came in last, but didn't notice her.
And this is
1962.
62.
1962. So I started teaching at Tonto School, 5th grade. And I also taught 5th grade girls PE. And I also coached. I coached the boys' B teams. They have, because of size, they had A teams and they had B teams. Dave Neal was the A team coach. I was the B team coach. And in those several years that I coached there, won 2 district championships, not division, 2 division, not district championships. So in basketball and flag football, so we did all right. And after my 3rd year there, well, let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself. In 1963, I was on my school's bowling team, Tonto School. I had bowled with them the year before, so this is our 2nd year bowling. And one of our first games was against the team Hohokam School. And Margie was on that team. She was asked for a reason she doesn't know to bowl. She said, I'm not a bowler. She said, well, you're going to have to bowl anyway. So she was on that team. So Hohokam bowled Tonto October 3rd, 1963. Over 50 years ago now. Her team won 2 games in total points. And she won me. Now, I didn't win her, but she won me. Because I talked to her afterwards right up the top of the steps, and I just looked right in her eyes, and I said, I can see my future there. And so as she walked away, going back home, I said, that's the girl I'm going to marry. Not only that, Tonto School was 3 blocks from where she lived. You know, I just read something somebody sent about the difference between coincidence and God incidents, where coincidences happen, but God incidents, there's rhyme. And this was a God incident.
Are both those schools still standing?
No, Tonto isn't, but Hohokam is.
And that's where you met, at Hohokam?
No, we met at the bowling alley.
At the bowling alley.
Yeah, it was Papago Lanes, and now Papago Lanes is no longer there. It's no longer a bowling alley, it's an antique store, but it's still there.
Are those steps still there where you met?
Oh, I don't know, I've not been in, but it could be. The steps down to where the bowling lanes were. They're probably still there. I doubt if they did anything to the antiques. Probably covered over the lanes and such. But yeah, it's still there.
And that was located where, just to have it
on Scottsdale Road, south of Osborne.
South of Osborne.
Mm-hmm. Between Osborne and between Osborne and McDowell, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the west side of the road or east side?
West side. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still there. So let's go back to teaching.
Teaching now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're still at Tonto.
Yeah, I'm still at Tonto. After 3 years there, the math teacher, whatever his name is, I forget. Anyway, he changed schools, and so I applied to teach math at Tano School, and I was accepted. And so my last 2 years at Tano School, I taught 7th and 8th grade math, which is really interesting because a third of the kids I got, I had already taught in 5th grade. So I knew most of the kids, and I enjoyed that. That was really good. But then Margie and I together finished our master's degree together. We took our final test same time, and we graduated from ASU the same day. And when I got my master's degree, I said, hey, you have to have a master's degree to teach in high school, so I'm going to go apply for a job at high school. So I'd had 3 years at Boys Ranch. I had 5 years in Tano School, so I had 8 years behind me. So I want to go to check out. So I went to the Phoenix Union High School District offices. At the time, they were on 16th Street. And I talked to a guy, and he was interested. I taught math and that type of thing. He was interested in that. And he said, Maryville High School is starting a new science program called Time, Space, and Matter. And the counselors have told the kids there's no textbook and there's no tests. And so 17 classes have formed in Time, Space, and Matter at Maryville. Now, Maryville at this time was on double session, so they had 5,000 students. A big school. And so they asked me if I would like to teach Time, Space, and Matter. I said, sure, why not? So I taught Time, Space, and Matter. True, there was no textbook, but I gave them tests. But I had to run off all kinds of papers, and follow them through. And they had a neat little packet of things that we would work with. It was a pretty well hands-on type thing. And it was a very, very interesting course. But after the students found out that there were tests, the next year there weren't 17 classes. It was down to 4. But during that summer, the summer 1968, they were running a program called Earth and what is it called? Anyway, Earth and Space Science, ESCP, and they wanted 10 people from the Phoenix Union High School District to go to the University of Colorado to learn how to teach ESCP, Earth Science Curriculum Project, from the authors who wrote the book. And so I volunteered, and I was chosen. So I was one of the 10 teachers from Phoenix Union High School that went to Colorado. And there were 40 of us all together, so there were 10 teachers out of Utah, I think, Colorado, and New Mexico. So we had 40 there. And we had a full month of learning how to teach Earth and Space Science. So my second year at Maryville High School, I was 2 years of Earth and Space Science, 2 years of Time, Space, and Matter. But then, at the end of that year, they quit Time, Space, and Matter, and there was no more Earth, Space, Science for me, so I was dropped from the science department. Didn't have any classes for me to teach. But the principal, Lou Burnett, talked to me about it. And he says, well, what else can you teach? I said, I'm into geography. I've got a lot of geography classes and such. And so if the students aren't taking Earth and Space Science, they're taking something else. So a lot of them took geography. So I was continued on, and I taught geography, full year of geography the next year. So that kept me at at Maryville. That was my third year at Maryville. The fourth year at Maryville, I was almost totally back to Earth and Space Science. I had one class of geography because the head Earth and Space Science teacher, Bob Edgar, had resigned to go to Prescott to help his father-in-law run a drugstore, I think it was. So, boom, after that I was Earth and Space Science almost the whole time. But at the end of my fifth year there, we're still in double session. First classes start at 6:30. Last class are out at 5:45. Teachers have to be either early or late. Most of the time I was the late, but one year I was early too. So I had the full gamut of things. But Phoenix Union High School District is building a new high school about 2 miles to the west called Trevor Brown. Trevor Brown was named after a doctor, a pediatric doctor, who was on the school board for years and years and years and years. So they opened up full components. I mean, anyone who lived in that district, whether they went to Maryville for 3 years, 2 years, or just go to them as a freshman, had to go to Brown. And so when we opened Brown, I had 5 classes of earth science. So that was pretty good. So here I am at Trevor Brown High School. At Maryville, there was no chance to try to get coaching or anything else. But when I went to Brown, I knew some of the teachers who went there. And I got a job, not as coaching, but I got a job because the coaches came from Maryville, the full component of coaches. I got a job running the scoreboard at football games. John Brown and I ran the scoreboard at the football games. And, yards, downs, points and such. Mm-hmm. Basketball, I was the head scorekeeper of basketball. I had to introduce the players, give the Pledge of Allegiance and all that sort of thing. And I did that for home games, but away games I just kept score for them. And then track and field, I was the starter for the running events. And I enjoyed that. In fact, one time I was asked to do the freshman track meet, the all-city freshman track meet. And so I did that for about 5 years, and then I just stopped doing it. I was at Maryville, or Brown, for 11 years. And I was into really earth and space science and field science class. I mean, I had good kids, and we had a good club, after-school club. And we used to go about once a month. I think we visited every observatory, every mine, every museum, every national park, every state park in the state of Arizona. We had a good group. In fact, I wrote a course, second-year geology course, Earth and Space Science course, that I was able to teach. And the last unit of that course was on the Grand Canyon. And so we were into backpacking, and I thought, well, hey, kids, would you like to backpack in Grand Canyon? Oh, yeah, we'd love to. I said, well, I've got this class. You have to take this class for 13 weeks to learn about the Grand Canyon. And then if you qualify, we'll hike the Grand Canyon. Well, I started out with 45, but about 25 qualified. I had to take 3 different backpacking groups into the Grand Canyon so those kids would visit the Grand Canyon. I did the first one. I did that in May of that year because the seniors were going to graduate, and so I made sure they got up there. And then the next year I had to take 2. So that year, 1977, I had 3 backpacking. We went all the way down to Phantom Ranch and back. One time it was raining, snowing up at the top and raining down at the bottom, but we went anyway. Mm-hmm. And the kids had things to do. We would, get to where the Toro Weep would meet the red wall and that type of thing. They would see the contact points, and write about and that type of thing. Yeah. Interesting thing. So that kept me busy. Mm-hmm. But the department head, Leon Jordan, my 11th year there, died. He died in January. And at that particular time, they were reopening North High School, where I graduated from school. They were reopening North High School because at one time, the Phoenix Union High School District closed West High, North High, and East High right across the center of the city, all at the same time. And the parents who lived in that district didn't think that was right. So they sued Phoenix Union High School District to reopen one of the schools and they won. The parents won. Not only did they win, Phoenix Union District had to pay the lawyer bills, and they had to reopen North High School. So North High School was closed for 2 years, but when they reopened, this is 1981. Is that right? No, 1983. When they reopened in 1983, they opened only with freshmen. You know, different from Trevor Brown. They just moved everybody over. But they reopened with just freshmen. And they had enough earth science courses for me, 4, and then I taught one math course because I taught math before I was teaching algebra. And they were going to have a freshman football team too. Well, I knew Danny White, not the Danny White of Mesa, but a Danny White, was going to be the coach. He was coaching at Brown, so he came over and was coaching at North with just freshmen. I said, Danny, how's the freshman football team coming? He said, it's coming along okay, but I don't have an assistant. I said, see me next week, and if you don't have an assistant, check with me. And he didn't have an assistant. He called me. So I became a football coach, freshman football coach. But the beautiful thing about that freshman football coach is we had the freshmen as freshmen, we had the sophomores as JV, and we had the juniors and seniors as varsity. We had the same boys for 4 years. Plus, added a few here and there and everywhere. But that was quite an experience for the coaches and the kids. When they were freshmen, they won 4, lost 1, and tied 2. When they were sophomores, they won 5 and lost 3. When they were juniors playing a varsity schedule, they were 4 and 6. When they were seniors, they won their first 9 games, undefeated. They lost a game in Lake Havasu City the same day I had my first hip operation. So I don't know if that affected them or not. But anyway, they qualified for the state tournament and won 2 games, but they lost in the semifinals 7-6 to the team Peoria that finally won the state championship. So their record that year was 11-2. So they did great. And then Danny White left, and I was junior varsity coach the next year. But halfway through the season, they passed the no pass, no play. My record was 3-1 up to that point. We'd lost to Cactus, which is a much bigger school. And I lost practically the whole starting offensive team. I was the offensive coach, and we had a defensive coach. And from the rest of the season, 4 games, 1 we won by forfeit, we only scored 1 touchdown. And that was on a punt return. So that was my sports in high school.
Wow. So teaching, now you're back at North.
Back at North.
And how long did that last?
8 years.
What years to what years?
1983 to 1991.
Okay.
And I had 2 girls that were high school and graduating, and I had enough points, your points and your age qualifies you to retire. And you needed 85 points, then it was lowered to 80 points, but by the time I decided to retire, I was past 85 points. I had 32 years of teaching, and I was 57 years of age, so what's that, 89 points. Anyway, I decided I was going to retire, early retirement. And the reason I decided then, my youngest daughter graduated from college in 1990. Mm-hmm. And then I said, well, college plus 1 year. And so in 1991, not only was she out of school, we didn't have to worry about that, but the house payments, the house was paid for. Okay. And so I said, hey, I'll retire. So I retired. Margie's still working. She's teaching at Monte Vista School, 5th grade, and other places. She had a varied career of things. And I was sitting around the house doing nothing. And one day Margie says, hey, look, here in the paper, it shows that Orpheum Theater is having a docent class, and you can go there and learn how to be a docent and give guided tours to the Orpheum Theater. I said, that sounds interesting, so I'll do that. So I did. Now this is in 1993 when this came out. This is when the Orpheum was closed, basically. They had taken all the seats out, and it was a total mess. In fact, they were at the time building the third City Hall around the Orpheum, and including the Orpheum in the building. The Orpheum is in the one corner, the northeast corner of the City Hall. It's connected. It's connected. So I learned how to give tours there, and we gave tours through this old building. We walked on plywood, and we saw the paintings were covered over in black and all sorts of things. And then in 1988, the city had passed a bond issue that some of the money would go to restore the Orpheum Theater as long as, it was backed up by public donation. And so in 1996, they closed the Orpheum to tours, and they did the remodeling. And it took them up into 97. I guess maybe it took 2 years, 95 to 96. But in January 1997, they reopened the Orpheum, back to where it was back in 1929 when it reopened. And interesting, the first week was Carol Channing and Hello Dolly. And Margie and I had seventh row back right in the center to see that show. Because I was a docent there. It was good. All I had to do was pay for it. But then I gave tours there for 10 years. Not only did I give tours in the Orpheum Theater, but I also ushered some. But then we had a slide program that people could make reservations to see, and so I was one of the people who took the slideshow to various places all around the valley, and I gave slideshows on the Orpheum Theater. Oh. While I was at the Orpheum, I met Betty Kyleman and Don Stitt, and they both were docents at the Rawson House, which is downtown. Rawson House is at 7th Street in Monroe. And so they talked me into being a docent at the Rawson House. So I started a docent in Rawson House in 1994, giving guided tours through this house that was built in 1897, and it was remodeled, refurbished by the city of Phoenix, part of this 1988 bond issue that was passed. And so it was a beautiful, beautiful building. 1895, 2 stories, an attic. And it's sitting on a city block. And now when the city was formed in 1870, it was a half square mile. It ran from 7th Avenue to 7th Street, east and west, a mile, and ran from Van Buren to Jackson Street, north and south, a half mile. And it was divided into 98 blocks. Each block was 300 square feet. And they were numbered 1 to 98. Well, Rawson House is on block 14. Block 14. And so we started giving talks about the history of the block and everything. And I got interested in it. And I read some research that had been done by Vicki Beaver. It had all kinds of addresses and things about what was going on that block over the years. She went to the city directory and such. And so I researched that, and I developed a program showing the development of the block through the years, from 1890 up to whenever I did this in the 1990s. And that was an interesting thing, too. And then the next year, 1995, was the 100th anniversary of the Rawson House. It built in 1895, so 1995 was the 100th anniversary. So I was there for that, and had some programs going for it. We had a slide program there too that told the history of the house. So I gave the slide program and that type of thing. That was rather interesting. Then, I guess a year or two later, our head at the time was trying to remember her name. Oh, what is her name? In fact, she was the daughter of Robert Young. So I'm trying to, the movie actor. What's their name? I stood right here on the tip of my tongue, and anyway, she asked me. She says, "Hey, they're having a big convention in Phoenix of the cities. The cities of the United States are having a convention, and they want somebody to develop a downtown history talk." And she would ask me if I would be interested in doing it. I'd say, "Sure, I'll do it." And so, with the help of one of the City of Phoenix people, we developed a downtown history walk. I mean, it was an all-day walk. Yeah. We did a lot of different things. We had a guided tour of the Orpheum Theater. We had a guided tour of the new Phoenix City Hall. We had lunch at the Patriots Park. Tom's Restaurant provided the lunch there at the park. We went to various different things. We went into buildings and this, that, and the other thing. And so we just had a great time. I think I had about 25 people on that walk. Mm-hmm. And then when I started doing history walks at downtown Phoenix, I just kept doing it. And I know a lot of, different things. I always like to tell the story. When I was at Grace Church, I was teaching a high school Sunday school class, and Pastor Struble was the pastor, and he was the one that married Marge and me. And Pastor Struble says, "Hey," I said, I've got somebody here who would like to teach this high school class." He says, "Do you mind doing something else?" I said, "No, I'll do something else." I said, No big deal." And so I was replaced by a guy named Bill Rehnquist.
A familiar name.
Who just happened to be whatever. He worked his way up to the head of the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. And also, too, I got pretty good in with John Driggs, who was a big wheel. He was an ex-mayor of Phoenix and a big wheel of getting the Rawson House redone. And I was in first name basis with old John Driggs. And one time I was leaving the Rawson House, and here comes John Driggs walking across the grounds with a woman named Sandra Day O'Connor. Mm-hmm. And so I got to meet Sandra Day O'Connor. And so I shook hands with Sandra Day. I said, "Sandra Day," he says, "Do you know Bill Rehnquist?" I said, "I know, I said, "How is he doing?" He says, "Well, his wife Nan died." I said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that." Because I had been on the education committee with Nan Rehnquist at Grace Lutheran Church. He even got over to their house, which was over in Palmcroft area of Western Phoenix. And so I'd tell those stories as I go through the area. It was rather interesting. I also like to tell the story. The job that I worked at, working my way through college, was at Saltwater Service Company. I was relief summer truck driver and delivery driver, and also regeneration man. Clean out all of the stuff and put in the salt again. And one of my jobs was replacing the soft water tank at the penthouse at the security building, which is on the southwest corner of Central Avenue and Van Buren. Well, up at that security building was a guy named Walter, I didn't go over these, Bimson. Walter Bimson was president of Valley National Bank. So I get to visit his house, which is a penthouse, and the basement is not downstairs, it's up. Had a park in the alley in back, take the elevator up to the top main floor, wheel that tank all the way over to the private elevator, take the private elevator to the penthouse, and carry the tank upstairs to their saltwater tank.
Wow.
So I had a few things going on down in the city of Phoenix. That was
You did.
a good thing.
You were Mr. Phoenix.
Yeah.
You know a little bit about everything.
Yeah.
How did you, I don't know if this is the right time to make the transition, but how did you get started doing the national park?
Oh, that's another story.
Got into it.
Now, did I cover all my volunteers? I did. I also volunteered at the Arizona Historical Society Museum. That's where I know about Arizona history. So before we get to Park Service, we'll do that. They had open house over there one time. You know, the thing is, the Arizona Historical Society Museum for a long time was located on North Central Avenue, just north of where the bridge goes over to Deck Park. Okay. It was on the left side of the street, and it has a name, which I forget. But then some money came up. It wasn't part of, it may have been part of that bond issue, but this also involves the city of Tempe. Money came up that they were able to build a new Arizona Historical Society museum over on College Avenue. Now, College Avenue in Tempe is 68th Street in Phoenix. So as you drive down 68th Street, you go into Phoenix, you're on College Avenue. And it's over there in the southeast corner of Papago Park. Margie and I visited there when they were having open house, but there was nothing there. They hadn't been able to have the funds to move from their North Central Avenue place. But they said, here, fill out this form, and we'll get back to you. Believe it or not, they did. And so I became in fact, I was there for the open house. I was a docent at the open house when they reopened and I think it was in 1996 or 7 when they reopened it. So that was a rather interesting thing. And you learn about the history of Arizona.
I would think.
And I was there for, I was at the History Museum for 12 years. I was at the Orpheum for 10 years, and I was at the Rawson House for 15 years. So most of those ran concurrently.
Wow.
So that's my volunteer system.
That's amazing. And continuation of your teaching.
Oh yeah, that was it. I mean, it was history. I was into history. Not much math, but a little science here and there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know a lot about the saltwater service situation in the valley. That's for sure. First park I ever went to, I was just graduated from high school. I was sitting out in front yard, and old Foster Bachman comes up. He says, "What are you doing this summer?" I said, "I don't have anything to do." He said, "Hey," "I worked at Grand Canyon last year. Come with me and we'll go work at Grand Canyon." So I borrowed $5 from my mom for a bus ticket from Phoenix up to Williams. And then from Williams, we waited for the train to come in, and the Fred Harvey buses came down and picked up the people in the train, and we got on and went in, and the bus parked right at Bright Angel Lodge. And Foster said, "I worked here last year, so let's go in and get a job." So we went in, and we got a job. As dishwashers.
Uh-huh.
As dishwashers. So my first national park, the first day in there, I'm a dishwasher at Bright Angel Lodge.
Uh-huh.
And within a week, Foster and I hiked down to Phantom Ranch and back. Stupid us. We went down to Bright Angel that has water and came up to Kaibab, which doesn't have water. And we had to beg water to even make it out. The guy on one of the Wranglers was headed up here. He gave us a little bit of water. We made it up at the top. So, but anyway, about 2 or 3 weeks into my job there, they were expanding. More people were coming in, so they needed another vegetable cook. And the steward's last name was Walters. And so here, I'm 17, and I'm hired to be a vegetable cook. Now, there's two vegetable cooks. One comes real early, and one comes real late. My time was right in the middle. So I became a vegetable cook. Grand Canyon. So I enjoyed my summer at Grand Canyon, and that's a couple years later, 1952, had a chance to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. This is with Bill Billow, the one that helped me to get into Wittenberg University. And we went to an ashram up there, a Lutheran ashram, Lutheran Student Association, and more or less, there was, about 40 or 50 of us up there. That was nice. That was my second national park. And then Bill, of course, gets me into Wittenberg University, and he takes me back there. And where do we go? We stop at Grand Canyon, Zion Canyon, Bryce Canyon, Grand Tetons, Yellowstone. Not a national park, but Devil's Tower. And then he was going to seminary in Maywood, so we stopped in Maywood. We also stopped at a farm of one of the guys we knew at Grace Church. His parents worked on a farm in Minnesota, near Jackson, Minnesota. So, and then he took me to Wittenberg. But then here with him, Grand Canyon, Rocky Mountain, Zion Canyon, Bryce Canyon, Grand Teton. I mean, I've been national parks all over the place, but didn't think anything of it. Marge and I met in 1963, got married in 1964, and we taught. But the next year, 1965, I talked her in to taking a big camping trip with a tent. In fact, her mother said I was trying her out. In April, before we got married, I took her to a camping trip down to Chiricahua National Monument, which I'd been before and knew about it, so we were down there. And she passed with flying colors. It wasn't no problem. We should be able to go. But anyway, here we are. We're going on a 10-week camping trip. I mean, we drove over 11,000 miles. We visited 31 states, got up into Canada. And as we went along, we would visit national parks. First national park we visited was, my thought process is killing me today. The one in New Mexico called Carlsbad Caverns. Went to Carlsbad Caverns. Then next national park was Hot Springs. In Hot Springs, we were camped there several days, and we were able to talk to some of the rangers. And most of them were teachers who had this job in the summertime and taught the rest of the year. And we found that as we went along several places. Well, we didn't do much about it yet, but in 1968, Margie and I are camping on the north rim of Grand Canyon. And who's a ranger up there but a physics teacher at Phoenix College? And so I said, Margie, how would you like to try for a job in the national park? And so she typed up all the stuff. I applied for 14 different parks. This was in the fall of 1966. 14 different parks. And in February of 1966, I received a telegram from Grand Canyon. They wanted to hire me as a ranger. And so this led to that, of course. In 1967, I became a park ranger, uniform and all. Mm-hmm. So I worked up there 1967. 1968, went to the University of Colorado, to learn how to teach Earth and Space Science, ESCP, so I didn't work there. But in 67, I was at the village. When they rehired me, 68, I was rehired at Desert View. So I lived out of Desert View. We lived in a trailer at Desert View, Windy Ridge. Evening programs there was no electricity, so we had to do a lot of talking. And then, boom, 1969. No, 60. That was 69. I was at Desert. 1970, I was transferred to the North Rim. The park naturalist over there was married to the one of the rangers. We call him a danger ranger. And so they had an extra building free, an extra cabin. So I was hired over there, and I taught. I was a ranger over there for a summer. That's really a nice area. You ever been there?
No, I've not.
Oh.
Not yet.
Do it.
Yeah.
Do it.
It's a long drive.
Oh, yes. I always like to tell people when I worked at the South Rim, you can see the lodge at the North Rim,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can see it. It's 10 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
But to get there, it's driving further than it is to Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix is 205 miles. It's 210 miles.
Yeah.
And one night I was at the visitor center desk, and a guy come in, "Where's the Grand Canyon Lodge?" I said, "You got to be serious."
Yeah.
Why? He says, "Well, I have reservations to stay there overnight." I said, "Okay." It's 10 miles that way, but 210 miles this way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Anyway, we apply. We get a job. I'm at Desert View, North Rim. And then that place that they had, the extra cabin, well, that couple went to another park. And so, therefore, my cabin that I had was no longer available. So I was dropped. I was not even transferred back to the South Rim. I was dropped. And I didn't do much, went to summer school. I was teaching world geography, so I was taking geography courses and that type of thing. And in 1960, where are we? 1974, Al Vandershoot, who was a fellow teacher in Phoenix, who I met up at the Grand Canyon, he said, "Hey," he says, "you interested in coming back to Grand Canyon?" I says, "Why?" He says, "Well, they're opening the minibuses on the West Rim this summer, and they don't have an interpretive program. And Bill Clark, the chief park naturalist, asked me if I knew anybody who could be able to help with that. And he mentioned my name. And so here, Al and I, Easter break from school, teaching, we go up and we develop the naturalist program for the West Rim minibuses for 1974.
Wow.
And so I was there 1974, 75, 76 on the West Rim. I was a supervisor naturalist. I was, training the rangers and auditing them and everything. Al and I both, we were dual heads, so we did that. In 1977, a deal came out in 1976. Was anybody interested in making a transfer, an exchange program to Kings Canyon National Park? I said, why not? So I applied for it, and I was chosen. And so I go to Kings Canyon National Park with the family. Well, okay. In the South Rim, you're in training center apartments because the National Park Service has two training centers, one in Harper's Ferry, which I went to one time, and at Grand Canyon. So we had good billeting. Get to Kings Canyon, they have tent houses, 2 rooms, wood wall, tent side, metal roof, corrugated roof, 1 sink with cold water, no hot water, no bathroom. Bathroom is 50 yards down the hill. But Margie and I and the girls survived. We enjoyed that. And then 78, I came back to Grand Canyon, 78, 79, and 80. In 81, and we decided, I'm going to break. I've been working school, the next week Park Service, get out of Park Service, next week school, for 7 straight years. I said, I want a break. So we had a tent trailer, so we took a trip from here to Florida and back. Enjoyed it. Visited a lot of national parks. And when I got back, I tried to get a job back at the South Rim, but they didn't want me anymore, I guess. They dropped me as a supervisor and all that jazz. So I had applied to other parks, and I was hired at Rocky Mountain National Park. So I get to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. And that's a beautiful park, too. really nice. I was in the Estes Park section, but we used to go up at the Alpine Visitor Center. It's quite a deal. You're up at 11,000 feet. You know, you walk. There's a hill just outside of the Alpine Visitor Center. Have you been there?
No, I'm not.
No. Anyway, you walk up at the top of that hill, and there's a sign up there that says, "You are now higher than Mount Hood, Oregon." I went up there one time, opening early, and to get through, there was about a 10-foot wall of snow on both sides of the road. They had to plow their way through to get into that area. Anyway, I worked there for 2 summers, but at this particular time, my girls are in high school, and one of them can't even, she's on a dance line at Camelback High School, and she didn't even want to come up for the summer, so Margie stayed home with them. But all 3 of them came up one time. This is my first summer there in '82, and they were up there for just a short period of time, and the next year, Leanne didn't even come up at all. So I said, hey, you know, this is defeating the purpose. I'm trying to save money, but I'm running 2 households, and you can't save money that way. But the Park Service did me a good job. They didn't like me, I guess. In fact, I was a 50-year-old male, and the chief park naturalist at that time was against 50-year-old male. He had gotten rid of a couple of them the year before, and so I was not rehired. I was what they call rehire in competition. And I asked Skip Bess, I said, Skip, do you ever hire back anybody under these conditions? He said, no. And I said, I won't break your record. So I decided right then I wasn't going back. And then another, there's a God incident, right? So I get a letter in February inviting me to the science seminar in Boston, Massachusetts. So I go back, enjoy that, come back again. And then later, they're having a workshop on different sources of energy out of Boston College. This is a year that I'm missing Park Service. I'm back in I'm back in Boston having a great time. I was there for the 4th of July. Got to go down and hear John Williams and the Boston Pops play. And boy, and that's quite a fireworks display they put off there. Boom, 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 boom. It just rattles you. Yeah. And so I wrote a letter to Skip Betts. I said, Skip, how are things at Rocky Mountain National Park? I'm enjoying the summer in Boston, Massachusetts, working for the National Science Foundation. Sort of cut them down. We hit it off very nicely. It was something else. It's hard to believe. Yeah. Hard to believe. She was a beautiful lady, well educated. She had a job, and she was working on her master's degree too. We both taught 5th grade, same school district. I mean, how else can you match it together, huh? Yeah. And we dated. We dated practically all the time. In fact, shortly after, October 3rd, 1963 was my parents' 34th wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. They were married on October the 3rd. And then the next month, in November, of course, was the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And from, I think, that assassination on, we saw each other every day. We did a lot of things. We took field trips out to Whitlow Ranch Dam to collect rocks. We would climb up top of Mormon Mountain. Mm-hmm. We went to a church group. We had a young adult group at church. We both attended that. We went to football games at ASU, saw movies and that type of thing. So we did a lot of things. One of the things we did, our youth group, young adult group, went to Flagstaff, go up to Snow Bowl. Mm-hmm. So we went up there one time, and from that time on, it was downhill for me. That was in December of '64. We were engaged in December '63. We were married in January, engaged in January '64, and then took her on a camping trip at that time, make sure she was that type of thing. Yeah. And hey, it was great. We got married at Grace Lutheran Church, June the 1st, 1964. Took a honeymoon up to, well, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. Went to, one of the first things, Margie's parents, by the way, had leased out, they owned a motel in Holbrook, Arizona. And it was leased out. When she went to college at Arizona State, Ed, her father, leased out the motel and they moved to Scottsdale. That's why I say that they only lived 3 blocks from where I was teaching. They lived in Scottsdale, but they still owned the motel. But she had a younger brother that he came down too. He finished high school down here, and she finished college. And then of course I met her, and on our honeymoon we headed our first night out of Phoenix. We stayed at the motel in Holbrook. Unit number 1. And when we got back, her mother didn't believe it. I said, check out the records. So she would check them out. There I signed it. We went from there, we went up to Durango. And Durango was just starting their Silverton train area. In fact, it cost us $5.50 to take that train, take that train. It was a beautiful ride, it still is. I think we've been on that 4 or 5 times now. Yeah, it's really. Then we went to Colorado Springs, spent a couple days there, all the stuff around Colorado Springs. Then we drove in and around, up through Denver, over the mountains and back, and then ended up at her sister's place. We didn't stay there, but we visited, who lived in Winslow. Ruth Kalis and her family lived in Winslow. And we got back to Phoenix. We had to come back because we went to summer school. So that's our first year, basically. Actually, it wasn't even our first year. We didn't get the first year until we were teaching again in October. And then we were doing things around the valley. I think at one time we had tickets to the Phoenix Symphony. You know, the Phoenix Symphony started in downtown Phoenix at Phoenix Union High School. But when they built Grady Gamage, the Phoenix Symphony moved to Tempe. And Margie and I had tickets to see Grady Gamage. They opened in 1964, Grady Gamage. So we had season tickets to see the Phoenix Symphony there. And that was one of the things. And they had what they call the Star Theater, which was a theater in a round, and it's a celebrity theater now. And we went to a lot of plays, saw a lot of Hollywood stars there. Debbie Reynolds, one from, for sure, the Unsinkable Molly Brown. Yeah. So we saw a lot of them there. So we did a lot of things, went to church. She joined the church. And we decided to start raising a family. So now Margie was born in Holbrook, which is Route 66, right? After we got married, we lived in an apartment down on Bellevue in Scottsdale. We lived there for a year. And when her parents went back to the motel, her parents' house was vacant, so we moved in there for a year. And then we moved into Phoenix in 1966. Route 66, 1966. And our first child, Leanne, was born in 1966. Margie had taught at Hohokam School for 4 years, from 1962 to 1966, yeah. 63, 4, 5, 6, yeah. And then she retired and started raising a family. And in the meantime, I was teaching at Tonto, and I changed to Maryville. And then that's when Annie was born. I was at Maryville. But Annie was born 1 year to the day that Margie's father had died. He died in November 7th, 1967. In fact, my father died the next April, 1968. So we lost both our fathers within 5 months. One very long period at all. But Annie was born on her grandfather's birthday, November 7th, 1968. So here we have 2 kids now. We're going to park service in the summertime. We're camping trips, doing this, doing that, trips to Florida. And by the time Leanne's 11 and Annie's 9, Margie decides she wants to go back to teaching, which was nice. And she taught at the local schools, so she was teaching basically at the school where the kids were going, at Monte Vista School. Then she was switched around down to Creighton for a while, but then she came back to Monte Vista. She was in good with the principal, Sheldon Clark. And so we had the girls, and they had fun in the summertime in the parks. We did a lot of camping outside of Grand Canyon too. We like to go to, I'm familiar with, there's 2 national park monuments. One is a Wapatki, and the other one is a Sunset Crater. And they had a campground at Sunset Crater, which is interesting. It was a national park, but the campground was run by the National Forest Service. They got together. So we did that. We camped one time at Lee's Ferry, which is out in the middle of nowhere. Go to the North Rim and stay. And we would go over to Kanab occasionally and stay at a place called Perry Lodge. Perry Lodge is one of the motels there. That was a place where they made a lot of movies in Kanab, Utah. In fact, we were there one time when they were making Bionic Boy with Lee Majors. Got to talk to Lee Majors. Right there on the street. But they also had a group there that they put on plays in the summertime. They put on 2 different plays in the summertime, and we'd go over to Kanab, stay overnight, and watch the plays. We did that for 4 or 5 years. Really interesting things to do. So that's some of the things we did. And then we started visiting the national parks then. We've seen a lot when we went to Florida and back. But we've said, hey, let's see all the national parks. So we started to seeing all the national parks.
How many are there?
There are 59 now. When I first went to a national park, there were about 36. So they keep adding them. And most of the national parks are a national monument before they become a national park. Like the one at Soar National Monument in Tucson is now Soar National Park. Petrified Forest National Monument is now a national park. Capitol Reef National Monument in Utah is now a national park. Arches National Monument is now a national park. Death Valley National Monument is now, see, that's how they came. And the most recent one is called Pinnacles National Park. It's in California. And it was the most recent one, I think, in 2012. It was a national monument before, and the big claim to fame there is a San Andreas Fault runs by it. And it's good for mountain climbing. They have half of a mountain there that the other half is down by Palmdale. The fault has moved. Over the years, it's moved that half of that mountain all the way up to 100 or so miles. I forget exactly what. But Margie and I doing well. We're going to Grace Lutheran Church. Then by the time our girls get at Grace Lutheran Church, I was quite active. Taught high school. I told you that one time. I taught a course to the high school kids how to help Sunday school teachers. I taught a course of different religions, and we would go out at Sundays and visit other churches. Greek Orthodox Church, we would go to the Lutheran Missouri Synod Church, we'd go to Presbyterian Church, we'd go to Baptist Church, go to Methodist Church. After we went to several of them, the kid says, "Let's go back to our church."
Yeah.
And she taught Sunday school there too,
Yeah.
3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And she also started a bookstore. And she also started the Christmas decorations, Christmas. She started that down at Grace Lutheran Church. So she did a lot of different things at church. Then when the girls got to the age of confirmation, I'd taught confirmation also at Grace Church. When the girls got confirmation age, we decided, well, Mount of Olives is just 3 or 4 blocks away. Let's change churches. So we did. And so I caught confirmation the next 4 years there with my daughters in class. And Margie wasn't too active then in church. She got into Indian Maidens. You're familiar with Indian Maidens? It's a YMCA branch. That there's a section for the boys, and I forget what it is, maybe Indian Braves or something, but then they have the Indian Maidens for the young girls. And so she got quite involved in that. And both Leanne and Annie were in Indian Maidens. And in fact, one year, Margie was head of the program. And what they did once a year was go to snow camp up in the Prescott area. So they'd go up to snow camp. And one time it really snowed. Yeah. So she kept busy doing that. Then she finally wanted to go back to teaching. She got into teaching at Monte Vista School, which was our neighbor's school where our girls were going. And then various changes. She wasn't teaching 5th grade then. She was teaching 6th grade for a while. And then all of the schools in the Creighton district at the time were K through 8, and they decided, well, they wanted to put all of the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at Creighton School. So Margie was shifted down to Creighton School, where for 3 years she taught English down there, whatever. And then finally she got back to teaching 5th grade at the Monte Vista School. She taught for 20 years, from 1977 to 1997. And then including the 4 years she had previously, and plus running gifted programs, she taught school for more than 25 years.
Wow. Well, where was your house in those days?
My health?
Yeah, your house.
Oh,
Where did you
my
live?
house. My house. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The house. Well, okay, we were living on, when we first got married, we were living down on Bellevue, just a little apartment. Then we moved into Margie's parents' house for a while. And then we moved into a house in Phoenix, 3144 North 33rd Place. In Phoenix, my parents had been living there, and we asked them to move. I had bought the house 5 years earlier, and I moved my parents there to get out of the house they were in, which is not good. Anyway, they moved out, and they moved over on 26th Street, and Margie and I moved in this house. We moved in on March the 13th, 1966, and we lived there for 41 years. Made a lot of changes. It had a carport and a storeroom by itself. We remodeled the kitchen, gutted it completely. We made the carport into a family room with fireplace. Then later we added on another carport. We remodeled the bathrooms. Did a lot of different things. It was a nice house. It was about 20,000 square feet. We had a large living room, a large dining room, nice kitchen, 3 bedrooms.
Just for the record, I bet it was 2,000 square feet. I'm guessing.
Oh, what did I say, miles?
20.
Oh, 20.
20,000.
Make it 2. Make it 20,000.
Whatever.
No, 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it. No, cut that out.
No, and you moved in there apparently right about the time Leanne was born. That was the same year?
We moved in March, and she was born in September.
Okay. Yeah.
Margie was teaching when we moved in there, and she retired teaching that May because she was 5 months pregnant at the time. And then we moved in. Leanne was born. Good Samaritan Hospital. The building she was born in is no longer there. They've rechanged that hospital quite a few times. And he was born in Good Samaritan Hospital also,
Uh-huh.
1968, and I was working at Maryville.
Mm-hmm.
But I was working at Maryville also when my father died. You know, as they say, they
Right.
were close together there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh.
and then what the girls, they go to Monte Vista School, which is, you could hear the announcements in the morning at Monte Vista School.
Yeah.
Leanne went all 8 years at Monte Vista, kindergarten and all 8
Mhm.
years at Monte Vista School. Then she went to Camelback. Annie went to Monte Vista School, kindergarten through 6th grade. Then she qualified for a gifted program up at Squaw Peak School,
Mhm.
which is in the Creighton district.
Yeah.
And so she went up there and graduated from Camelback. They both went to the University of Arizona, 2 years apart, of course.
Mhm.
And they both joined the same sorority down there.
Mhm.
So that was fun. And we had girls down in Tucson for 6 years. Leanne 2, both of them for 2,
Mhm.
and then Annie for 2. And we'd go down there and homecoming, see football games, and visit the area. And the 6 football games that Arizona played, Arizona State,
Mhm.
those 6 years,
Mhm.
Arizona State never won one.
Ooh.
One was tied. Arizona won 5.
Yeah.
And we used to get phone calls at halftime from the girls. You scum devils, what's wrong with your football? Of course, we had great times at the parks. I got to a lot of science institutes that the girls were able to go to 2 of them.
Yeah.
One was the University of Colorado, where I learned how to teach ESCP.
Mhm.
And the other one was up at Bellingham, Washington,
Mm.
Western Washington State College, which is now a university, which is Ryan's alma mater.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. I did a study up there on geology, and we did glaciation.
Mhm.
They're close to Canada. We went up into Canada
Mhm.
a lot. We flew up into Canada a lot. We went down the river. One time we were on an. They wanted to show us what a meandering river was like, so they put us
Mhm.
all in canoes, not at the same time, and we meandered down the river. Well, the canoe I was in, one of the kids wanted to go all the way around the fast part, and the other guy wanted to go in the slow part on the inside,
Mhm.
and there's a big pile of trees in the middle.
Mhm.
So we ended up in the trees. The canoe went down under, and I ended up on a branch. And I mean, we were out there stuck in the middle of a glacial-fed river
Mm.
out of Mount Baker. This is
Mhm.
the Nooksack River in Washington.
Mhm.
Glacial-fed river.
Yeah.
Not fun. We had to be rescued.
Not warm.
Not well.
No.
Well, finally, uh, 2 of the guys had. I had a life preserver, and so did another one, but the third guy didn't. And the other guy with the life preserver, he got into the river and went down, and brought the rescue crew. They had to rescue us by boat.
Wow.
Really powerful boat to try to get us out there with that fast current running.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the girls went up there with that. We got up into Canada a lot on that one. Excuse me. Did a lot of different things. And the one I had in Massachusetts, I went by myself, and another one I had had one over at Caltech and Jet Propulsion Laboratories that I went by myself. So I did a few of them by myself. I did programs. While I was at Grand Canyon, I developed a program, slide program, that I called the Sights and Sounds of Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
I took Faraday Grove-Phase, Grand Canyon Suite,
Mhm.
and set it to slides that I had taken.
Wow.
Took 36 minutes.
Yeah.
Nice program. And I gave that at a convention in Phoenix, another convention in Carefree, convention in Cincinnati. I don't think I gave it in Boston. Anyway, conventions around a lot. But Margie was able to do most of the things together. But some of those I went by myself. Well, for the travels, of course, we've been to all 50 states. The cruises, we didn't start until, oh Lord, I was 1993.
Well,
1993. I'd finished teaching and Margie was still teaching. And in the meantime, we had purchased 2 timeshares. One at Sedona, Arizona, at Arroyo Roble, and another one at Incline Village in Nevada. And we were exchanging. You know, you're familiar with the timeshare exchanging program. Well, we were able to exchange one of them to the Virgin Islands, Charlotte Namia, in the Virgin Islands, called Bluebeard's Castle. Okay, well, it's out in the middle of nowhere, so how in the world can we get there? Well, hey, a cruise ship goes there, so let's do a cruise. So we call AAA, and we get to meet Carol Kalmar, who, by the way, 21 years later, is still our travel agent. Although she lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma now. Anyway, she set it up so we could have that cruise. It would take us to the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas, and down to Venezuela and around and such. And then when we got back to San Juan, Puerto Rico, we flew to St. Thomas, and there's where we visited one of our national parks. You know, we have a national park in the Virgin Islands. It's not on St. Thomas, it's on St. John.
St. John.
Yeah, we had to go to St. John by boat, and we visited Virgin Islands National Park.
Wow.
So that was our first cruise. First cruise. Second cruise was to Alaska. And in Alaska, we, the ship we were going to go on is the Star Princess, had hit a rock about 6 weeks before we were going to go on it, so it was out of commission. But Margie and I still went the land tour. So we went up to Alaska, but no cruise this time. We just went to Anchorage, and we got on a train in Anchorage and went up to another national park, right? Yeah. This is called, what is it called? Mount McKinley, no, Denali National Park. Denali National Park. So that was our first national park in Alaska. Then we went back later, and eventually after 4 trips we visited all 8 national parks in Alaska, 2 above the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
Our next cruise was the next summer because our cruise was canceled. Princess gave us half fares for the next cruise. So we took the cruise next year in Alaska. But this time we visited other national parks. We rented a car and we visited. By plane we went down to Katmai National Park, which is where the bears feed on the fish, down where the land of 10,000 smokes. We went by plane, what they call them, bush pilots. We went by bush pilot. Then we visited Lake Clark National Park by bush pilot, and that's flying out of Anchorage also. And then after we get back to Anchorage, we go down by car. We rent a car and we go to Kenai Fjords National Park. And then we swing around and we go to another national park in Alaska. My memory is horrible today. Anyway, it's a double name. Another national park, and then we end up in Anchorage, and then we sent down the sewer and we got on the cruise finally down to Vancouver is where we ended up. So that was our second cruise. Our third cruise, we were in the Baltic. Then this was Holland America. Our first cruise was Carnival. The second cruise was Princess. The third cruise was Holland America. And we started in England, and one of our stops was St. Petersburg, Russia. And we also docked in Germany and rode by train down to Berlin. So that was another one. That was 96, 87. 99 we went through we went to the Mediterranean Sea, started in Lisbon, Portugal, went all the way over to Istanbul, ended up in Athens, had a side trip in Rome, had a side trip in Olympic National Park, and one of the neatest islands ever, a side trip in Santorini, one of the Greek islands. So that was a cruise. That was 98. In 2001, we went through the Panama Canal. Started in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, ended up in San Diego, California, through the Panama Canal. Then we went in 2003. We did this every other year, except the Alaskan thing, which canceled for a year. 2003, we went to French Polynesia, Tahiti. And Tahiti, well, the reason why we chose this one of the stops is in American Samoa. And guess what American Samoa has? One of our national parks. So we got to Tahiti and took a cruise up to the islands and went to Samoa and American Samoa, it's a national park, back to Tahiti. That was 2003. 2005 we went to Australia and New Zealand. It's a nice trip. Started in Sydney, ended up in Auckland, New Zealand. 2007 we went to Beijing, China. We visited Beijing for about 4 days, then we went down, caught a Princess cruise ship, the Sapphire. We went to Japan, we went to Shanghai, we went to Okinawa, we went to Taiwan, we went to Hong Kong. We've made 2 stops in Vietnam, stopped in Singapore, and ended up in Bangkok, Thailand.
Wow.
That was quite a trip. 2011? No, that was 2007. 2009, we went back to Alaska because we had not been to the Arctic Ocean. So the land tour before the cruise was up to the Arctic Ocean. It took us by train to Denali National Park, by bus to Fairbanks, to Coldfoot, and to the town up there was a Deadwood, or Dead Horse, Alaska, which is the town where they have the oil wells that send the wells down there. So that was 2009. 2011. Oh, well, that's when we took a trip to the Eastern Mediterranean with a group, a couple pastors we knew from Phoenix who now live in, well, one lives in California, the other one lives in Texas. They got a group together, and we flew and we visited Rome for about 4 days. Then we got on a Cunard, the Victoria, Queen Victoria on Cunard line, and we went from Rome down into, started into Rome, ended up into Athens, Greece, and we went to Ephesus, and then we went down to the Holy Land. We were in the Holy Land for 2 or 3 days, and we went to Cyprus, and then went to Egypt and visited the pyramids. And the 2013, our most recent trip, where in the world did we go in 2013? I'm done.
I remember something about England.
Where?
England.
England. Oh, yes,
London?
that's right.
Great.
We visited London for several days. Flew to London, visited London, then got on the Caribbean Princess and took a transatlantic cruise from Southampton, England to New York City via Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and Canada. So that's our last cruise. That's last year. It was quite a cruise. 17 days on that ship.
Wow.
We were supposed to go to the Shetland Islands and the Faroe Islands, but the storm on the Atlantic Ocean was so bad that we missed it.
Yeah.
And even then, going around it, we were in rough water
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get around the storm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the time we went into Taiwan, a tornado, not typhoon, went through just before we got there.
Uh-huh.
That was another day of rough water.
You have seen it all, haven't you?
We've seen a lot of it.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of it. We've just been to one little country in Africa. We've seen most of Europe. And we've seen a lot of Eastern Asia and Western Asia, too. But we have been to Cambodia and places like that.
Yeah.
Mongolia.
Well, that's for future odd-numbered years.
Well, we're thinking next year of taking a river cruise
Uh-huh.
on the Danube River.
So do you know which river yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably end up down in the Black Sea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Going to Budapest, Romania, and Bulgaria, and Austria, that type of thing. Yeah.
Wow. How do you summarize a life like that, Elden?
I've got a lot of books. I don't throw away anything. I don't. It's quite active. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. I didn't think I'd start out that way, but I got the best traveling partner you could ever have, and we just went.
Mm-hmm.
We just went. She didn't complain.
From 7 houses in 7 years.
7 houses in 7 years.
To 11 cruises and 6 continents and...
Well, 41 years in another house. This one now, the 13th, what's the day, the 5th? Next week.
Yeah.
We've been here 7 years. Yeah.
Congratulations. What a life.
We've done a few things.
What a life.
Done a few things. I think one of my biggest accomplishments was being a football coach. I never played high school football. I was injured. That was fun. My job was the defensive backs and the special teams, kickoff and kickoff return team, punt and punt return team, and then the defensive backs, and point after touchdowns and field goals. And I had good defensive backs.
Yeah.
And we had a great time. In fact, one of my defensive backs, Muhammad Oliver, ended up playing with the Green Bay Packers. He went to the University of Oregon, then the Green Bay Packers, and after that he was playing with the Phoenix Rattlers for a while too. Of course, he's up in age now. He's not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about my mother's side of the family. We have a genealogy book here. It's of the Eby family, and it was written by a distant cousin of mine, I guess, a woman named Effie Eugenia Minich. And she printed this one in 1951. I mean, talk about a lot of people. And she kept updating it. In fact, the last letter I got from her was dated 1972. She lived in West Carrollton, Ohio, which was just south of Dayton. But the interesting thing about this genealogy, it follows the Eby family from a Theodosius Eby, who was born in Switzerland in 1663. So that goes back quite a way. Now, we don't know too much about the first 5 generations of this family. We do know their names, but the next 4 are all called Christian Eby. Now, the original Eby, Theodosius Eby, left Switzerland, moved to Germany, and then he moved to the United States and ended up in Pennsylvania because of religious persecution. And where he ended up in Pennsylvania was Lancaster County, which is the county where the Amish are and down near Philadelphia. So that was there. And the next Eby was Christian Eby. He was born in Lancaster County. Then the next one is Christian Eby, who was born in Lancaster County. And I don't have any dates for them. Oh, the one was born in 1690. The fourth one was born in 1743 in Lancaster County. And then the fifth one, Christian Eby, was born in York County, Pennsylvania, which means the family moved west. York is basically over near where Gettysburg is located, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He was there in York County until the family moved to Baltimore County in Maryland. And then they moved quite a bit. They were there until 1828, and that's when the Eby family finally moved to Ohio. They moved to Montgomery County, Ohio, which is where Dayton is located, in Montgomery County. But then, shortly after that, in 1853, they moved to Preble County. Now you're getting to the county where I was born. So I have relatives who moved into Preble County in 1853, and it wasn't for 80 years later until I was born. So we have some pretty deep roots in that area. Now, the family sort of expands when we get to Adam Eby. Adam Eby was born in Baltimore County 1814, but he then moved to Ohio in 1838. And he lived on a farm just south of Dayton along the Miami River. And Mother was born on that particular farm because she remembers the barn had Adam Eby 1845 written on it. Now, the Eby family sort of started changing because Adam Eby's daughter, Elizabeth Eby, married a Wagaman. She married a Wagaman. Well, she was born in 1845, but she married a Wagaman in 1865. And they lived in near Arlington, Ohio, and that is pretty much southwest of Dayton. No problem there. It's southwest of Dayton. Her next to the youngest child, she had 8 children. Her next to the youngest child was a boy called Willis Wagaman, my grandfather. And he was born in near Elden, Ohio, which is southwest of Dayton. He lived in his grandfather's, or I guess it was his grandfather's farm south of Dayton, where Adam Eby lived. And he lived there, and Mom was born on that particular farm. And they were there until the city of Dayton bought them out. It was about 1927 when the city of Dayton needed a place for their sewage disposal plant. So they bought out grandfather's farm there. And then for a couple years they moved around until he finally moved to West Ellick. And that's when the mother was in high school when they moved to West Ellick. She went to Lanier High School, and that's where she met Dad. And then the rest is sort of history. But that's this book, and it really covers a lot of different things about our families. Now, I have a lot of other books here. Mm-hmm. This, I like to talk about my father's side of the family now. His grandfather was a man called Louis Vater, W-A-T-T-E-R. And Louis Vater was born in Hamburg, Germany. I don't have the date, but anyway, on grandfather's death certificate, and grandfather Walters died in St. Louis in 1945. On his death certificate, you can see very plainly that the last name Vater, W-A-T-T-E-R, was changed to Walters. The first T was made an L, and an S was added. And as I say, you can see it right on this document I have in my hand. Not only that, he had a brother who didn't add an S to his name, and his last name was just Walter. Grandfather Walters Walters was born in Burlington, Ohio. That's the most southern part of the Ohio River as it bends around between Ohio and Kentucky. And they were orphaned. And when, I don't know his age when he was adopted, but he was adopted by the Fudge family that lived in Preble County, Ohio. And then, of course, grandfather Walters meets my grandmother, Frances Bell, and they were married in Camden, Ohio, and their firstborn, my dad, Darrell, was born in 1910. So that's a very short history of that. Now, back in 2005, Margie and I visited a lot of this area here, and in this book on page 64, I have noted where a lot of my relatives are buried. South of Eaton, there is one where my uncle Ralph is buried, and then on Inglemar Road, about a half mile where I was born, my grandmother, an aunt and an uncle are there, and Christian Eby, the fifth generation Christian Eby, who was born in 1777, is buried there. So I was born a half a mile from where my great-great-great-great-grandfather is buried. So that's really ties in. But this map shows you one cemetery south of Ellick, the second cemetery over here on Inglemar Road, and the third cemetery is near Ellerton, Ohio, southwest of Dayton, and the fourth cemetery is lower Miami Valley Cemetery, where my grandfather, Willis Wagaman, my grandmother, Minnie Wagaman, are buried, plus uncles and cousins and a few other things. So that's this particular book. I want to do this basically because I know very little about my grandfathers. I remember them. I don't remember exactly how old I was when I last saw my grandfather Walters, because not knowing to me, my grandfather was divorced from my grandmother. They sold the farm. He moved to St. Louis and she moved into Eaton. Eventually, my grandmother Walters moved into a house just down the street where we lived on Upper Avenue. But I don't know how old I was, probably 7 or 8 years old, and I don't remember even saying goodbye. Now, my grandfather Wagaman, I know a little bit more about because I last saw him 2 years before he died in 1957. And when I visited him, he said, you know, Elden, he says, out next to the dump there's a big rock, and I want you to help me push it down into this dump that's down below there. So we went out to the field. We laid on our backs. He had a truss that he had to hold in place. We laid on our backs, and with our feet, we just pushed that rock down over the hill. So that was a very nice visit I had with my grandfather Wagaman. Unfortunately, my mother's mother died before she was married. And so when grandfather Wagaman remarried, he married a woman named Nina Williams from Tennessee. And she did not want anything to do with our family. We never had a meal in that house, and we never stayed overnight in that house, which is sad because I did a lot of things in my grandfather Walter's house when I was between the ages of about 4 and 7. Got a lot of photo albums here I'd like to talk about. This particular photo album was made by my mother, and it has a nice picture of me before I was a year old. And then she has a lot of pictures of me in here, and it goes through my meeting of Margie, and then finally our 2 children, Leanne and Annalie. So this is a nice book. So as I say, I don't know very much about my grandfathers, but I hope if you are watching this DVD sometime that you have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about me. This is a book that has my Army history in it. I had to fight to stay out of the Army so I could finish college. And all of the letters and whatever else I was in here, and then what I had in basic training and on through, and I have what I call a sweat sheet, which is right here. This sweat sheet shows me where I was and when I was while I was in the Army for 2 years, thanks to the local draft board. who sent me a greeting, not only once, but twice. But because I was a draftsman, I was able to make a chart like this because I had what we call a Leroy pen. And that would, you just put ink in it and draw a line across, and you get something nice like this. But most of the blue area there is when I was stationed at Fort Myer, right at the Arlington National Cemetery and Pentagon in Virginia. So most of my time was spent there. But I did my basic training in Fort Ord. I did my second 8 weeks of training in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, riding a bus to Army Map Service. And then I was transferred to a unit at Fort Myer. The orange shows where we went to Presidio, San Francisco, and then the rest is Fort Myer. And this book here is the book of my basic training. It's the 6th Infantry Division, Fort Ord, California, from September into October of 1955. This is my Army book. Oh, by the way, in order to, I was going to Phoenix College when I was drafted the first time, and I was prevented from going into the Army by an intern pastor at Grace Lutheran Church named Bill Billow. He wanted me to finish college. Not only did he want me to finish college, he wanted me to finish Phoenix College and then go on to Wittenberg, where he was a graduate. Wittenberg is a Lutheran university located in Springfield, Ohio. And he was able to do that. So they canceled my first draft notice. The second time I was drafted, Bill went to the State Board of Appeals and won the case, and I was able then to go on to Wittenberg University. And not only that, he took me there. We traveled from Phoenix back to Springfield, Ohio, visiting national parks along the way. This is another interesting book. This shows the bowling chart from the day I met Margie. It's my team because their captain kept their team. It shows that we won 1 point, and I had a 198 and a 180 game, whatever. But this was through the Scottsdale Association. And then here's a card that I sent to her for Halloween, and it goes on and on and on. And her engagement and pictures are in here, and our wedding invitations are in here. And then the first house we lived in is in here, first apartment. So this is a very interesting book. It's a book that you might learn something from it. Mm-hmm. This is a book here that Margie and I made. It shows pictures of when we met. It gives our names, birth dates. It gives when we met, engaged, and got married, and it names our children's names and birth dates. And then it has pictures. It says Margie meets Elden. And then here's the bowling team, and there's my bowling team. And it goes on. Here's the dating pictures. Here's our wedding picture with the family. Our honeymoon. And then the year after that we lived in Scottsdale. This is another book here. Photo album that Margie and I made. What we've done here is we've taken pictures that we know of from 1933, when I was born, until 1963, when we met. And so the first here shows me in 1933 and 1935, and then we have to get up here to 1940 before Margie shows up. And then 41 we're together, then 42, me, Margie, and it goes on and on for each year. 47, me and Margie. This is when we moved to Phoenix. This is the last morning I was in Ohio before I moved to Arizona. So pictures like that. This is when I should picture here showing when I played for Phoenix College. Margie, her family, in the motel that they owned up in Holbrook. Baseball teams I played for. Margie was in the drum and bugle corps at Holbrook High School. This shows me when I went into the Army. And on and on and on. Margie was also represented Holbrook High School in at Girls State down in the University of Arizona. This shows the softball team I played for in the headquarters company, United States Army. Until finally, we get here to 1963 when we met. So that's an interesting book. Now, this book is sort of a hodgepodge of different pictures of Margie, me, and the family. This shows my father's service station. And when he ran a service station during the war from 1944 to 1947. This shows a picture of me and my dad at the service station. Mm-hmm. And then they go on. This is when I went to Colorado and ashram. This is the fraternity I belong to. These are Army pictures on down the line. Then these are pictures of the teaching staff where Margie taught at Hohokam and I taught at Tonto. Pictures of that on and on. Then other pictures. Here are pictures of me at the Grand Canyon as a ranger. At Trevor Brown High School. As a football coach. Well, a lot of different things here. At University of Oregon, where I went. A couple pictures of Margie and me. So a lot of family pictures that goes into Leanne and Annie Bose showing their school pictures through the years. Mm-hmm. So that's another nice book that you might be interested in looking at if you want to know anything about your father, grandfather, or great-grandfather. This book is a book of my education history, teaching history. Starts with Boys Ranch in 1959, from Boys Ranch to Scottsdale to the Phoenix Union High School District and on down the line. It covers everything, and it has a lot of contracts, pictures of different things, comments of students had, school papers, and even a research paper that my sister Janet made talking to me about my job at Arizona Boys Ranch. And these two books show year by year my Park Service employment. First year, 1957. Second year, I didn't work because I was at the University of Colorado. Then 1969, I was at Tucson, Desert View. 1970, back at Grand Canyon. Then nothing until 1974, when I was asked to help write a interpretive program for the West Rim when they started the minibuses. So all of that's here, year by year, from 1967 to 1983. All over. I have 2 big boxes of maps in the garage. And I have atlases. I counted them the other day. I have more than 20 atlases. Most of them are from states, different state atlases. Family scrapbooks. In my office, in the house, I have scrapbooks of the family at what we did around the area of trips, camping trips that we took. We have a Phoenix College sports scrapbook. I haven't talked much about my activity in sports, but I played basketball and ran track for Phoenix College, and I have a scrapbook on that. And I also have information about what I did when I was playing in the service. I have colored slide trays. You can't believe the colored slide trays I have. I have 28 of them. They average about 600 slides each. So I have a lot of slides. Photo albums in my office from 1992 to 2008 have pictures, all the pictures we took. From then on, we went to computer. I have DVDs of pictures we don't have printed, and then box of photos of Margie and me in our younger years. And the collections, I have road atlases, state maps, national park books and folders, Grand Canyon books, Arizona books, and Arizona highway calendars, war books concluding the Civil War, Battle of Bulge and World War II, books that I've made through iPhoto, 9 of them, DVDs and CDs of 007. I have all the DVDs of 007, and they're up in the 20s now. Baseball scorebooks. I saw ball games at Diamondbacks playing at Chase Field now. It used to be Bank One Ballpark. I saw over 180 games, and I have scorecards that I made of every game I saw. Plus, the next day I cut the scorecard out of the paper to make sure the paper was right. I have Arizona highways calendars. Every highway calendar Arizona's made, I have. I have baseball caps. I have a collection of over 200 baseball caps. World travel books, earth science books, National Geographic books. Here's different newspapers out of Grand Canyon. I'm in some of them. So I have those maps, Grand Canyon maps.
A well-documented life.
This is a group off-duty, first train that goes into Grand Canyon. Me, one of the points. Look out there. You know, I could say, well, what was my greatest day in sports? Would you?
Yeah.
Could I handle that?
Absolutely. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, I was at Phoenix College. I went there 3 years. I didn't make the basketball team the first year, so I went 2 years so I could play, 2 more years so I could play 2 years of basketball. But I also ran track. And the first year I ran track, which was my second year of at Phoenix College, I was a sprinter. I ran the 100 and the 220. We used yards then, and I ran on the relay teams, either the mile relay or the half-mile relay, one or the other. And then we had a pretty good team. We had a guy in the hurdles, Gary Prentice, who went on and was national junior college champion in the high hurdles, and he was also the WAC champion at Arizona State when Arizona State was in the Western Athletic Conference before they went into the Pac-10 conference. But anyway, we were undefeated, and our last track meet before the national finals was in Blythe, California against Palo Verde Junior College. And we didn't have all of our players. We didn't have Clovis Campbell, our dash man. We didn't have Wayne Bickers, our weight man, who was out singing with the choir someplace. And Gary Prentice was not doing too great as far as hurdling is concerned. So I was asked to run the 100, the 220, the high hurdles, and the low hurdles against Palo Verde Junior College. And I got second place in all 4 races. And then the final relay comes up. The teams are so close, whoever wins the final relay wins the track meet. And it was a mile meet, so every runner had to run 440 yards. And I was chosen to be first. So I ran the 100, the 220, the high hurdles, the low hurdles, and now I'm running the 440. And so I ran, and I was ahead of the guy from Palo Verde at the end of the first lap. And the rest of the team was able to stay ahead. And so we won the relay, and we won the track meet. And we stayed undefeated. We stayed undefeated. I played a lot of softball, particularly for Grace Lutheran Church. And I had some pretty good years. And the pretty good years I had was the 3 summers that I worked at, the 4 summers that I worked for saltwater service. I was a Culligan man. Mm-hmm. So here I was out in the summer sun, driving a truck, hauling it, water tanks. Some weighed 150, some weighed 75 pounds. So I was pretty hefty with it. And during those 4 years, 1951, when I was 18, I was chosen to play an all-star team for the church league. And the all-star team was playing Phoenix, PBSW Ramblers, which is a woman's pro team. PBSW stands for Peterson, Brooks, Steiner, and Wist. They were called the Ramblers. They had a park out on East Roosevelt, which is no longer there. But I was chosen to be on that all-star team because of my play that 1951 season. 1952, I won our league batting championship at an average of .493, which is not, that's a sort of inflated because not every pitcher on every team was a good pitcher. So you can take care of it. But in the 53 and 54, I won the total league batting championship. 1 year of 544 and another year at 523. Mm-hmm. Also played basketball for Phoenix College. And then also in the Army, I was a pitcher. And then 2 years pitching for a headquarters company, U.S. Army, I'd won 18 games, only lost 5, and pitched a no-hitter. So that was quite an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the things I have done along the way, and as far as my athletic endeavors are concerned.
Favorite sports?
Favorite sport?
Yeah. What'd you really enjoy playing most?
Well, I played a lot of softball. I like softball. Yeah. I couldn't play hardball. No? I was on one hardball team the summer that we moved to Arizona. Yeah. So I only played about 5 games, and I think my batting average was about my weight. Maybe a little less. Couldn't hit a curveball.
Yeah. Let's see.
So I'd say that that softball was probably, because I was an all-star center fielder, and then I became a pitcher.
Well, as I hear the track events you were doing, it sounds like you excelled in the short distance.
I was a short distance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You were fast.
Yeah.
Quick.
That helped me in basketball too.
Yeah.
And it helped me in baseball. I used to be able to hit a ball to the shortstop and beat it out.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, softball.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. They only had 60 feet to go, so it wasn't that far to run.
Where do you think your love of sports came from?
My dad.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, he was quite an athlete. I remember the one photo album my mother had. It showed him playing football and basketball. And I told you about him when he was in Preble County, Lanier Township High School. They played College Corner, and the basketball court in College Corner, half of it was in Ohio and half of it was in Indiana. And he shot standing in Indiana and made baskets in Ohio. Yeah, and I saw him play some after I was, about 10 or 11 years old.
Yeah.
He played softball.
Mm-hmm.
So he was pretty good. My younger brother was a better athlete than my older brother or me both. He was very good in track, and he lettered in high school. Mm-hmm. In fact, when he was in 8th grade, he almost set the state record for 8th grade boys in long jump, which was called broad jump at the time. He was in the 100-yard dash, and I think he got second, but their relay team won state.
Wow. Wow.
So he was pretty good.
And which brother was that?
Willie, my
Willie.
younger brother,
Okay.
yeah. He was born in 1940. He was 7 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
My older brother was on the baseball team at Roosevelt High School. When he got to Phoenix, he was too involved in working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it sounds like your dad and you guys set the standard for your younger brother.
Yeah, and he took over. He did all right. He did all right. He didn't go to college, and I mentioned, I guess yesterday, that when he graduated from high school on Thursday, the next Monday he was an apprentice plumber with my dad. And he just didn't bother to do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a plumber all his life.
Mm-hmm.
Highlight of my life, meeting and marrying Margaret Burton. That's the highlight of my life. Mm-hmm. And then the teaching. 40 years I was in the classroom teaching. I enjoyed that, particularly high school science. I loved high school science. For 24 years I taught high school science. Mm-hmm. And then, believe it or not, when I quit high school, I went into being an aide in elementary school. And for 3 years I was an aide with Margie in her classroom, a fifth grade student. And for my last 2 years after Margie retired, I was an aide for a first and second grade teacher. And my job was to teach the low first graders to read. And so for 2 years I taught low first graders reading. And it's, you know, you keep working and working and working, and you think you're never going to be there, never going to get there, never going to... And all of a sudden it's like turning on a light switch. Because, hey, they're reading. I mean, as I say, well, I remember one girl, she just sat down one day, she started reading. I said, that is fantastic.
Keep ticking them off.
Oh, okay. Well, I went to teaching, traveling. I love to travel. All 50 states, 6 continents, all kinds of countries, 11 cruises. It goes on and on and on and on. All national parks. And I've been to 11 national parks in Canada. I've been to national parks in Great Britain, national parks in the Netherlands, national parks in Guadalupe Island. So national parks in Australia and New Zealand. So if there's a national park nearby, I usually try to get there. And then another time was being a coach, football coach at North High School. That was another one. When we had the same boys for 4 years. And another one was coaching the girls down at Queen Creek Elementary School, where in 2 years we won 3 championships. I can remember the one year we won the softball championship was the second year. We had lost one game to Williams Field. They had beaten us 14-13, girls softball. But the final game was against Williams Field, at Williams Field. And after all these high-scoring games, that final game went 7 innings, and the final score was 3-1. And our team won.
Wonderful.
3-1. I mean, they're not using gloves. This is an oversized softball. And so they're catching and throwing, they're getting people out, and they're doing a great job. Fantastic. So that pretty well takes me a lot of places there. And collecting things, that's fun. I collect. If any of my relatives down the line have problems learning about me, they just don't know where to find the information.